We have entitled this reflection as experiencing or experimenting a quiet solidarity. And with us, we have the pleasure of counting on Lina Soualem, a photographer whose camera not only documents but also builds on the grievances of family histories inherited without being told, and that they define us. She knows really well that there is a solidarity that is not announced. It exists in words, in the gaze, when something sometime invites to look away. So I am really grateful for your presence here today, Lena. And we also have Alain. He's astrophysicist who spends time looking into those silent frequencies of the universe, and also who has been focusing on on the astonishing reality that we are so minuscule. We are linked to something that we hardly understand, and that this comprehension, this silence reality is without a doubt a form of uh, fraternity. So, with our dear colleagues, I shall leave you.
M'entendez bien?
Can you hear me?
Là, Tardes.
Yeah.
Bonjour à tous et à tous. Désolé,
Good afternoon, everybody.
parlerai en
I'm very
français parce que
sorry
j'ai
because
appris
I
il y a très longtemps
will
l'espagnol, mais
pronounce these
malheureusement je n'ai
words
pas
in
l'autorisation
French.
ni en
I
espagnol.
don't dare to
Merci beaucoup
speak in
pour cette
Spanish. Thank
invitation.
you very much for
Je suis très
inviting me.
heureux d'être ici
I'm
dans
really
cette salle
delighted to be here in this very
Codex
special
Albert
setting of
Camus
the Trovadas Albert
sur ce
Camus
thème magnifique,
to discuss this wonderful theme,
Poetics.
fraternity, the
Alors
poetics
Sandra m'a
of
proposé de
connection.
parler du
I have been asked
silence
by Sandra to speak about the silent
à partir de
solidarity,
ce que le cosmos
drawing on what the cosmos can teach us.
Alors, je ne sais pas si vous êtes sceptique, mais
I
moi je
don't
l'étais
know
beaucoup quand
whether
Sandra
you
m'en a parlé.
are aware of this
Et
when
ce que j'ai
Sandra
réfléchi,
mentioned. I wanted to
je
reflect,
crois qu'il y a un lien.
and
Je
I
pense
believe
qu'il y a
that
un
yes,
lien
there
dans
is
quelque
a
chose d'assez
bound,
simple et
a
très
binding
profond.
element
On nous
between
apprend à chercher,
astrophysics
à
and
décortiquer le
when we
regard,
observe
comme
Earth from
nous en parlait
space,
Cynthia tout
we
à l'heure.
change the
Cette
scale
lumière,
of, and maybe here it
si on
helps
observe
us
la
to
Terre
become a
de
little bit
l'espace,
more humble. When we
surtout
observe the Earth
à
from
travers la
space, when
galaxie,
we situate our
on
solar system
découvre
within the
d'autres mondes,
galaxy, we
d'autres
discover other
étoiles,
worlds
des évidences
orbiting other
s'impose.
stars.
Nous ne sommes
And one
ni
thing
ensemble,
becomes
ni à
clear:
moitié la
we
même
are
chose.
neither the center nor
Et
the
pourtant,
measure
loin de nous
of
écraser, cette
everything.
réalisation
And yet, far from
profonde
crushing us, this
peut nous
realization
rappeler que nous
can bring
partageons
us
les
together.
mêmes
It can
conditions,
remind us that we
les
share
mêmes
the same condition,
vulnérabilités,
the same
le même
vulnerability, the
destin
same
matériel.
material destiny.
Je voudrais donc vous proposer un petit
I would
voyage.
therefore
On
like
part
to
de
invite
Terre,
you to join me
élargir
on
notre
a short
regard vers les
journey, to
galaxies
set off from
lointaines
Earth,
et
broaden our
revenir à une
gaze to
question
distant
très humaine.
galaxies, and then return to a
Est-ce que
very
la
human question.
contemplation
How
du
does
cosmos
contemplating the
change
cosmos
notre
change
rapport
our
à l'instant?
relationship with others?
Alors je commence avec une image qui,
I
je
shall
crois,
begin with an
résume
image
presque
which
tout.
I believe already
L'image
says everything.
de
Here,
quelques
the
semaines
Earth
auparavant
appears, it's only
si la
a
Terre
few weeks
apparaissait
old.
dans l'espace
We can see
comme
Artemis, and the Earth appears
suspendu dans le noir.
isolated,
Et ce qui me
suspended in the
frappant
blackness.
de ces
And
images,
what I
c'est qu'elles
find always
éliminent
striking about these
immédiatement les
images is
mots
that
qui
immediately
habituellement
they
nous
dispel many
accrochent
of
un
the
peu
things we
d'ordinaire.
usually cling to.
Depuis cette distance, on ne voit
From this
plus les
distance,
frontières,
we
on
don't
voit
see
seulement le temps.
borders, we don't
On
see
voit plus les limites de
affiliations,
temps.
we longer
On voit
see the
simplement une
divisions that
planète qui
preoccupy
est belle,
us. We simply see
mais aussi
a
très
planet that
fragile.
is beautiful and
Une
also very
fine enveloppe de
fragile.
lumière
A thin envelope of
soit
light, a
visible
small oasis
dans un
of life in
environnement
an
immense
immense
et
and
différent.
indifferent
C'est là que
environment.
l'astronomie rejoint, me semble-t-il,
This is where
une méthode très
astronomy, it
simple.
seems to me, connects with a very powerful
Embarquer
insight
ensemble
from
et
Camus. We
partager
are
une mission.
all in this together. We are on this ship
Concrètement,
together.
le
We are in
cosmos
this
nous rappelle donc
journey
ceci.
together.
Avant
The
d'être
cosmos,
séparés
therefore,
comme ciel
reminds us first
et
and
créatures
foremost
ici, nous sommes
that
réunis par
before
quelque
being
chose de très
separated by our
fort,
narratives,
une prise de
interests, or
conscience
conflicts, we are united
d'être
by a
plus,
shared
en termes
planetary
témoins abstraits,
condition.
plus nus, plus essentiel.
It's more raw and essential.
Cette idée devient encore plus
This
profonde
idea becomes even
quand on voit
stronger
notre,
when
notre
our
propre
planet
planète
is viewed
regardée
not
depuis un point
any longer
proche
from
et
near
comme une
Earth orbit,
simple
but as a
étape
mere
sur un chemin
waypoint on an
interplanétaire.
interplanetary
Cette
trajectory.
image
This
prise
image
pendant
was
les étoiles
taken
terrestres
during the Bepicolombo mission's flyby on Earth en
c'est une
route
mission
to
sur laquelle je
Mercury,
travaille depuis
a
plus de
mission
20
on
ans
which I have been working for over 20
d'un
years
des
as the
instruments.
principal investigator for one of the
Je vous en
instruments.
parlerai, mais c'est une autre
I will
histoire.
talk about it
J'aime beaucoup cette image
later. If
parce
you, I
qu'elle
really like this
montre
image because it shows the Earth no
l'ensemble
longer as our emotional center,
mais
but
comme
as
une
one
céleste
celestial
parmi d'autres.
object among many.
Pour nous, la Terre est tout.
For
Notre
us,
maison,
the
notre
Earth is
histoire,
everything:
notre
our
mémoire,
home,
notre
history,
langue,
memory, our
notre
language,
mort,
our
nos attachements.
dead, our
Mais
attachments.
pour une sonde
But for an
interplanétaire,
interplanetary
la Terre
probe, the Earth is
est
simply
simplement
a
une assistante
gravitational
radiotélévisuelle,
support,
une étape
a waypoint on a trajectory.
Ce déplacement de point de
This
vue
shift
est
in
extrêmement
perspective
précieux.
is extremely
Il ne détruit pas
fruitful.
la
It
Terre, au
doesn't
contraire,
diminish the Earth. On the
il l'aide
contrary,
à
it
mieux la
helps us to
comprendre.
understand it better.
Il nous apprend que
It
notre
teaches
monde est
us that
précieux
our world is
précisément
precious
parce qu'il n'est pas
precisely
le
because
centre
it's
de
not
l'univers.
the center of the
Il est
universe.
précieux
It is precious
et
because
rare.
it is
Il est
rare, finite,
habité et
inhabited,
vulnérable.
vulnerable.
Je crois que cette
I
image
believe this
nous
image
invite à une
invites us
forme
to
d'humilité
a
aussi.
form of
Nous
cosmic
habitons un monde
humility, or we
provisoire
inhabit a
et
tiny
pourtant
temporary
c'est le seul
world, and
monde
yet it's the
où nous
only
savons
world we
avec
know for
certitude
certain to
porter
support
la vie.
life.
À cette échelle,
On
la
this
solidarité n'est
scale,
plus seulement
solidarity is no
valeur
longer
morale,
merely a
elle
moral
devient
value.
presque une
It
conséquence
becomes
de
almost a
notre
physical
situation.
consequence of our
Nous
situation.
dépendons
We all depend on the same
de la même
planet,
planète, du même équilibre,
the
de la
same
même harmonie.
balance, the same shelter.
Alors prenons encore un petit peu
Let's
plus de
take a
recul par
step
rapport à ça.
farther back from
Cette
Earth.
vue est celle
This
prise par
view
la sonde
taken by
Cassini
Cassini
de
from
l'environnement de Mercure,
Saturn's orbit,
et c'est pour
it's for
moi
me one
une
of
des
the
images les plus
most
puissantes de toute
powerful
l'histoire de
images in
l'exploration
the
spatiale.
entire history
La
of
Terre ne serait
spatial
qu'un point,
exploration. Earth is nothing more
presque
than a
rien.
dot, a
Et pourtant, dans ce
tiny
point se
dot,
trouve
almost
tout pour
nothing.
nous.
And yet within that
Toutes nos joies,
dot lies
nos souffrances,
everything that
nos
matters
guerres,
to us,
tous
all
nos
our
amours,
joys, sufferings, wars,
notre
loves,
langue,
works,
nos
languages,
paysages.
faces.
C'est une image de petitesse, bien sûr, mais ce n'est pas une image
It's
de
an image of
négation, c'est une
smallness, but
image de
it's not an image of
responsabilité.
denial. It's an image
Car
of
si
responsibility.
l'univers cher
For
tient
if
en ce petit
everything
point,
dear to us
alors il
fits
devient
within that dot,
absurde de penser
then
qu'il
it
existe
becomes
plus.
absurd to think of
À
our
l'échelle
decisions
cosmique,
as
c'est
absolute.
dérisoire.
On a cosmic scale, they
Alors
are
c'est la communauté de
insignificant.
destin.
What remains
J'aime
is a
beaucoup cette
shared
idée.
destiny.
Nos
I
frontières
love this
disparaissent
idea. Our
avant même notre
borders
planète.
disappear even
Nos
before our
frontières
planet does.
disparaissent avant même notre
Our
planète.
borders disappear even
Peut-être que la
before our
solidarité
planet does.
silencieuse commence
And
là,
perhaps silent
en
solidarity
reconnaître
begins
que
here in
de très
recognizing
loin,
that, seen
nous
from
appartenons
afar,
déjà
we
à la
already
même
share the same
fragilité que
common
les autres.
fragility.
Voici maintenant la nébuleuse de la
And
Carène.
now
Avec
here
un peu de recul,
is the Carina
elle est vue
Nebula
par le
seen by
télescope
the James
spatial James
Webb
Webb. Vous savez,
Space
ce télescope qui est
Telescope.
actuellement dans l'espace.
It's
Ce sont
currently
des
on
paysages
space.
cosmiques qui
These
naissent
are
des
cosmic
étoiles
landscapes
et
where
du feu de la
stars
Terre.
and planetary
Notre
systems are
système
born.
solaire est né
Our
dans un
solar
tel
system
nuage.
was born in such a cloud.
Quand on regarde une telle image,
When we look
on
at an
éprouve
image
d'abord
like
une
this, we
émotion
first feel
esthétique.
an aesthetic
C'est beau,
emotion. It's
presque
beautiful,
irréel.
almost
Mais
unreal.
cette beauté est
But
aussi
this
une leçon.
beauty is also a lesson.
Ce que nous voyons
What
ici
we see
sont des
here are
nuages de
clouds
gaz et
of
de
gas
poussière,
and dust,
des structures
immense
immenses, des
structures,
processus accélérés
processes
sur des
unfolding
millions
over
d'années.
millions of
Nous
years.
sommes devant un
We are
monde
faced
qui n'a
with
pas
a
été fait pour nous,
world that was not
qui
made
ne
for
nous
us,
attend pas,
that does
qui n'a rien
not await
d'humain,
us, that has nothing human about its
notre
scale
destin.
or its rhythms.
Et pourtant,
And yet,
nous pouvons
we
le
can understand it,
contempler,
contemplate
le
it,
nommer.
name it.
C'est une
It's
situation extraordinaire.
extraordinary.
Une petite espèce apparue sur une
A
planète
small species
périphérique
that
est
emerged on a
capable de
peripheral
voir aussi
planet is
loin.
capable of looking so far.
Cela devrait nous rendre
This
fiers,
should make
bien
us
sûr,
feel proud, of
mais une
course,
fierté
with
sobre,
with a sober
non pas la
pride.
fierté de
Not the
dominer,
pride of
mais la
domination,
fierté de
but the pride of
participer à
contributing to the
l'intelligibilité du monde.
intelligibility of the world.
Devant de telles images,
Faced with such
je ressens
images, I
moins
feel
une
less a sense of
transparence
power than a
émotionnelle.
mysterious kinship.
Nous sommes faits de la
We
même
are made
matière
of
que
the
ces
same
nuages,
matter as
la
these
même histoire
clouds,
cosmique,
of the
la
same
même
cosmic
matière
history, the
éternelle.
same stardust.
Pour aller encore plus loin
To
dans
take
cette
this
extension,
shift in perspective
on va se
further,
situer
we
dans
must
une
now
grande
situate
providence
our own
dans la
home
galaxie.
within the galaxy.
Alors ici, nous changeons
Here we
d'échelle.
change
Cette
scale
lumière
once
passe
more. The
sans
solar
trembler de
system is
galaxie,
not at the
galaxie,
center of the Milky Way.
elle est dans
It
une
lies in a
fringale, dans
local
les
region
troncs de
on the
boue, à
Orion
distance
spur
de notre
at
galaxie.
some distance from the galactic
Cette
center.
idée paraît simple, mais elle est
This
philosophiquement
idea
très
seems simple,
profonde.
but it's
Depuis
philosophically
des
very
siècles, la
powerful.
science nous
For
apprend à quitter
centuries,
nos
science has
imaginaires
taught us
pour
to
plus
move
loin.
away from the imaginary centers we
D'abord, que la
assign
Terre n'est pas le
ourselves.
centre de
First,
l'univers
the Earth is
stellaire,
not the center
puis
of
le
the solar
Soleil n'est pas le
system,
centre
then
de
the
la
Sun
galaxie,
is not at the
et
center
la
of the
galaxie
galaxy,
n'est
and
qu'une
our
galaxie
galaxy
parmi d'autres.
itself is just one
Autrement dit,
galaxy among many.
tout dans
In
la
other words,
cosmologie
everything
invite
in
à renoncer
astronomy
à ce
invites us
privilège
to
cosmique.
relinquish our cosmic
Ce
privilege.
renoncement est
But this
libérateur.
renunciation is
Il permet
liberating.
de
It
remplacer la
allows us to
centralité par
replace
la hauteur.
centrality with
Nous ne sommes
relationship.
pas au
We
centre,
are not at the
nous sommes
center, but we
situés.
are
Nous
situated.
avons une adresse
We
cosmique.
have a cosmic address.
Et je trouve que cela
And I
résonne très
find that
bien
this
avec l'idée de
resonates very well with the
fraternité, de
idea of
relation.
relational
Exister, ce n'est
fraternity.
pas
To
être
exist
au-dessus,
is not to be
c'est être
above,
avec,
it is to be with,
au sein d'un tissu
within a
vaste
wider
de dépendance
fabric of
mutuelle.
interdependencies and connections.
Et pourtant, même
And
cette
yet,
adresse
even this address
presque
becomes almost
invisible quand on
invisible
s'éloigne
as
encore
soon
un
as
peu.
we move a little
Alors là,
further
c'est une
away.
image encore plus
This
étonnante.
image of
C'est l'image
the
du
really
télescope spatial
surprising
Hubble qui
from
montre
the
un tout
Hubble
petit bout
telescope
du ciel,
showing a
un petit grain
tiny
de
region
sable
of the
à
sky, a
haute orbite.
minuscule
Et
um,
cette petite
space
région,
fill,
minuscule à l'échelle apparente, est pourtant remplie de galaxies.
apparently minuscule, is yet filled
Vous voyez,
with
chacune de ces
galaxies.
taches floues est une galaxie.
Each of these blurry spots is a
Chacune
galaxy.
contient des milliards
Each
d'étoiles.
contains billions
Et
of
probablement
stars,
autour de
and
beaucoup de
probably
ces étoiles,
orbiting many of
des
these
planètes.
stars, there are planets.
Ici, le regard humain
Here, the
bascule
human
vraiment
perspective
et on
really
sort non
shifts.
seulement de l'échelle humaine,
We move beyond not only the
mais
human
presque
scale,
de
but
l'échelle
almost the
intuitive.
intuitive scale.
Je crois qu'il y a dans cette
I believe
image
there is a
une expérience
spiritual
spirituelle
experience in this
au sens le plus
image in the
large.
broadest sense
Elle
of
nous
the
oblige à
word. It
reconnaître que
forces
le
us to
réel
recognize
dépasse
that reality
immensément cette
vastly
dimension mentale,
exceeds our mental habits,
nos récits,
our
nos catégories
narratives, our
immédiates.
immediate categories.
Face à cela,
Faced with
deux
this, two
attitudes,
attitudes are possible,
soit le repli,
either
soit
withdrawal
l'élargissement.
or expansion.
Moi, j'y vois
For
l'invitation à
me, I
l'élargissement.
see it as an invitation to
Plus
expansion.
l'univers apparaît
The
vaste,
vaster the
plus
universe
il devient
appears, the
difficile
harder it
de le
becomes for
concevoir,
us to think
de
small,
vivre dans
to live
l'étendue,
within narrow
de croire que notre
confines,
horizon
to believe that our
immédiat
immediate
suffit
horizon is
à définir
sufficient
le
to
monde.
define the world.
Le cosmos n'abolit
The
pas
cosmos does not
notre condition
abolish our
humaine,
human
il
condition,
l'ouvre.
but it opens it up.
Et cette ouverture n'est plus seulement
And this
spéculative.
opening is no longer
Depuis
merely
quelques décennies,
speculative. Over the past
nous
few
avons
decades,
découvert
we
que
have
notre monde
discovered that our
n'est pas seul.
world is not alone.
Depuis 1995
Since
et de manière
1995
spectaculaire
and
ces dernières années,
spectacularly in
nous
recent
avons
years,
découvert
we have
des
discovered
milliers
thousands of
d'exoplanètes, c'est-à-dire des planètes
exoplanets, that is,
autour
planets
de notre
orbiting
Soleil.
other
Vous
stars.
pouvez aller consulter le site
You can
ici qui est
check
un
the
site hébergé
website
par Sciences Po
here
Paris qui vous donne
at
jour après
Science
jour le nombre
NASA.
d'exoplanètes qui grandit chaque jour.
Every single day we find out
C'est
about
une
more
révolution
exoplanets.
conceptuelle immense.
This is an
Pendant
immense
très longtemps,
conceptual revolution. For a
le
very
monde
long time,
semblait
or the world have
survolé
largely a matter of
du rêve
hypotheses,
philosophique,
of
de
philosophical
l'imagination.
dreams, of the imagination.
Aujourd'hui, il
But
relève
today, there
de
are
l'observation.
also a matter of observation.
Nous connaissons des mondes géants,
We know
des
of
rochers
giant
rocheux, des
worlds,
systèmes
rocky
compacts, des
worlds, compact
planètes de lave
systems,
extraterrestres
lava
et autres.
planets, and
Nous
ocean
connaissons notre
planets.
univers
We can
cylindrique.
even probe certain
Nous
atmospheres
avons même sondé certaines atmosphères grâce aux
using
instruments comme le
instruments
télescope
such as the
James Webb.
James Webb Space Telescope.
Autrement dit,
In
la
other
pluralité
words,
des
the
mondes
plurality
n'est
of
plus une
worlds
chose
is no
speculative.
longer mere
Elle est
speculation.
devenue un
It
champ
has become a
scientifique.
scientific field.
Et je trouve cela très
And I
important
find
pour
this
notre
very
sujet,
important for
parce que
our
découvrir
subject
d'autres
because
mondes,
discovering other
c'est déjà
worlds is
sortir un
already a
petit peu
step away
d'un
from a
réalisme
certain
quotidien.
cosmic provincialism.
La Terre demeure notre
Earth
horizon,
remains our
mais elle
home,
n'est plus le
but
seul
it is no
horizon
longer the
imaginable
only
planétaire.
conceivable horizon on the
Cette
planet.
découverte
This
nous prépare
discovery prepares us
intellectuellement et
intellectually and
symboliquement
symbolically
à
to
accepter qu'il
accept
puisse
that
exister ailleurs
elsewhere there may
d'autres formes
be
d'histoire,
other
d'autres
forms of history
équilibres,
existing,
peut-être un
other
jour
balances,
d'autres formes
perhaps
de
one
vie.
day other forms of life.
Et Et c'est ici que la science
And
rencontre
this
une
is where
question
science encounters
profondément
a
éthique.
profoundly ethical
Que
question.
signifie
What
chercher
does
la
it
vie ailleurs?
mean to seek life elsewhere?
Chercher la vie ailleurs, c'est souvent se
Searching
donner
for
la
life
recherche
elsewhere is
d'un
often
double de
presented as
nous-mêmes.
the search for a double
Mais
of
en, mais
ourselves.
en
But
réalité,
in
la
reality,
démarche
the most
scientifique la
accurate
plus lucide
scientific approach
consiste à faire
consists of
exactement
doing
l'inverse.
exactly the opposite.
Il ne s'agit pas de chercher
It's
nos propres
not
reflets,
about
il
seeking our
s'agit de nous préparer
reflection,
à
it's a
penser
matter of
autrement.
preparing ourselves to think about the
L'exobiologie regarde
other.
les environnements habitables,
Exobiology seeks
molécules,
habitable
déséquilibres
environments,
chimiques et
molecules,
des signatures
chemical
génétiques.
imbalances,
Mais elle
possible
doit constamment
biosignatures,
résister à une
but it
tentation
must
irrationnelle,
constantly resist a very human
projection de
temptation,
l'univers sur nos attentes,
projecting on the universe our
nos fictions.
expectations, our desires, our fictions.
C'est pour cela que cette recherche
That's
est
why
si
this
intéressante
research is so
philosophiquement.
interesting
Elle nous oblige à
philosophically.
distinguer le
It
souhait
forces us to
d'observer
distinguish
et
between
l'imaginaire de
wishful thinking
l'observation
and prove
et la
imagination and
ressemblance et
observation,
l'altérité.
resemblance and otherness.
J'aimerais ici faire une place à Camus,
I'd love to mention
qui lui
Camus here
portait
because in his
l'attention
work there's
au
always an
fait,
attention
à
to
sa
the
densité,
concrete world,
à son
to its
étrangeté
density,
parfois,
to its
à
strangeness
ce
at
qui
times,
résiste à ses projections.
to that which
Et je
resists
crois que
our
cela nous aide beaucoup.
projections. And I believe this helps us
Chercher la vie
greatly.
ailleurs,
To
ce n'est
seek
pas vouloir
life
annexer
elsewhere is
l'inconnu à
not
nos
to
catégories
seek to
familières,
annex the unknown to our
c'est
familiar
accepter une
categories.
réalité
It's accepting that a
qui est
reality can exist
hors de nous,
outside of us,
autrement que nous,
differently from us,
sans nous ressembler.
without resembling us.
En ce sens,
In this sense,
la recherche
the
de la vie dans
search for
l'univers
life in the
peut
universe
être
is
une école
perhaps a school
d'altérité.
of otherness.
Elle nous apprend que
It
rencontrer
teaches
l'autre
us that
n'est pas le
encountering the
réduire à
other
nous-mêmes,
is not
mais
reducing them to
confronter
our own
à ce qui dépasse
likeness,
notre
but
raisonnement.
allowing them to shift our way of thinking.
Et cela rejoint
And
profondément
this
cette
is
idée
deeply
d'une
connected to
solidarité
the idea of
définitive,
solidarity that
ni identité
requires
parfaite,
neither perfect
ni
identity nor
similitude, ni
similarity
fusion,
nor fusion,
mais la reconnaissance
but the
d'une dignité
recognition of the
de ce qui
dignity
n'est pas nous.
of that which is not us.
Et je voudrais terminer avec une
I would
figure
like to
ancienne,
conclude with an
presque
ancient,
prophétique,
almost
qui a
prophetic
pensé très
figure
tôt
who
notre
conceived of this
pluralité d'être.
plurality of worlds very early on.
Giordano Bruno, un
Giordano
philosophe
Bruno
moine
wrote at the end of the
italien,
16th
écrivait
century,
à la fin du
the Italian
17e
author,
il existe
that there are
un nombre de soleils
countless
et un nombre
suns
infini de terres
and an
tournant
infinite number of
autour de ce
earths
soleil.
revolving around these suns.
Bien sûr, Bruno n'avait
Of
pas nos
course,
instruments,
Bruno
ni
didn't
nos
have our
méthodes, ni nos
instruments,
preuves,
nor our methods,
mais il
nor
avait
our
déjà capté
evidence, but he already
une,
possessed this
le réel
dizzying
plus vaste que
intuition,
le cadre
reality
étroit dans
vaster than
lequel
the
nous sommes
narrow
enfermés.
frameworks within which we seek to confine
Je
it.
peux terminer là-dessus.
I find it very fitting to
Ce
end on
parcours
this
nous
note
ramène
because this
aux
entire
mêmes leçons.
journey brings us back to the same
Face au
lesson.
cosmos,
In the
notre
face of the
réponse n'est pas
cosmos, the
l'orgueil,
right
ce n'est
response
pas non plus
is
le
not
désespoir,
pride,
une forme de
nor it is
mesure.
despair.
Comprendre que nous sommes petits
Understanding that we are
ne diminue
tiny
pas
doesn't
notre
diminish our
humanité.
humanity.
Cela peut au
On the
contraire la
contrary,
rendre
it
plus,
can make it
plus
more
attentive,
authentic,
plus responsable.
trust, mindful, and responsible.
Le cosmos nous
The
apprend
cosmos teaches
l'humilité.
us
La
humility.
Terre nous rappelle
The earth
la
reminds us of our shared
vulnérabilité
vulnerability.
commune. Et la recherche d'autre monde
And the
nous
search for
éclaire.
other worlds opens us
Alors
up
peut-être que
otherness.
notre
So perhaps this
réflexion
silent solidarity
pardon,
we
aujourd'hui
speak of
commence
today
ici,
begins here,
dans le fait de reconnaître
recognizing that we are
que nous ne
neither
sommes ni au
alone at the
centre,
center
ni
nor
séparés
separate
presque,
from the
mais
rest, but
liés l'un
connected
aux
to one
autres, à
another,
notre
to our
planète,
planet,
qui a un
and to a
univers
universe
infiniment plus vaste
infinitely vaster
que
than
nous.
ourselves.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Gracias Sandra, por haber
Thank you,
pensado
Sandra,
en mí por
for
este
having
evento.
thought about
No estoy
me
acostumbrada a
and your kind
presentar
invitation. I am not
hacer
really
periodismo
used to
y después
give
de
speeches
películas
like
y
this.
después de la
Usually I
presentación con la
film,
gente que
then
me va a
I
presentar
make my
después.
films, and then I
Y
debate
presentar
and talk with
pues
my
muchas
audiences. But now I'll
expresiones
try to
y debatir con Alain.
express and
Hay
then
varias
debate
cosas
with Alain. There are several things
que suenan mucho desde
which
esta mañana
may
con lo que les voy a presentar.
resound with
La primera
what's been
cosa
said
es
this
la
morning.
alegría.
The first
Lo
one
que he escrito
is
aquí,
happiness, as you've
esta
seen here
presentación,
in the
es
subtitle
sobre
of my
mi padre, que
presentation.
se llama
It's about
Zinzin,
my father. His
que
name is
es
Zinzin.
argelino,
He's from Algiers. He's an actor, and he started as a mime. And I'm doing this piece of work on him because it's a silent way of spreading happiness in the world, especially in political, like Algeria or Palestine. So through mime artists and through we sometimes believe happiness cannot exist here, but I believe that yes, it is possible. There's always space for happiness. Sorry, I have technical issues. Well, this is my dad. And the key characteristic, the key features by Camus is the silent connection, right? So today I would like to tell you about the story of this Algerian mime artist who find his space in the world through silence in order to have his voice heard. It seems contradictory, but it's the way he does it. But before I jump onto talking to you about my father, please allow me to tell you a little bit more about me and why. I was born and raised in Paris. My mom's Palestinian. She was born in Nazareth in Galilee, and my father is Algerian. He was born in a village in southern France. Both my mom and dad are artists, actors. She was she grew up in a big family of 10 siblings in Galilee, and she started acting in the National Al Hakwati Theater, the Palestinian National Theater in Jerusalem. And then she moved to Europe and launched her international career. And my dad was son of immigrants from the 50s, and he started doing his mime artistry on the streets. And afterwards, his name was further renowned in France. Since a very young girl, I was aware of my myriad of identities. But being in France, I felt some plenitude. But all my identities were not a whole given the stereotypes and the French context around Arab identity in France. I need no further to tell you about France colonizing Algeria for 130 years. But in France, this is lived in a very complex manner, above all Arab, foreign, and North African identities, above all against uh, Islam. When I turned 21, 15 years ago, I visited Algeria for the first time because since I was a young girl, I would go to Palestine every year to visit my mom's family. All my Algerian family had emigrated to France in the 50s. So when I went there, it was during a trip with La Sorbonne, my university. I was doing a bachelor on history, and out of chance, our professor decided to go to Algeria. It only happened on that occasion, and it was like a revelation for me. This is what I was expecting. I was waiting for some sort of awakening to discover my Algerian roots. But when I got there, I felt some unease because I realized I was in a totally unknown territory. I had realized I didn't know anything about my Algerian grandparents because I had not been told about it. So I decided to grab my camera and film Sous Algeria, which was released in 2020. And this film talked about my need to break the silence because I needed to, through sous leur Algérie, their Algeria, I needed to understand what they had lived, what they had been going through. And this was necessary to better understand my place in in the world, in French society, and understanding these links between France and Algeria. As I mentioned, French colonized Algeria from 1848 until 1845 till 1962, the year of independence. And Algeria is the country where Camus was born in 1913 at the height of French colonization.
que se llama Bye Bye Tiberiades, Bye Bye Tiberiades en francés, que salió en 2023, que era un poco una forma de continuar el trabajo y la exploración que hice
my film Bye Bye Tiberias was released in 2023, and it was a continuation from my first film, and it arose from my need to continue exploring the memories of exile. But this time I felt my mother and the women of my Palestinian maternal family. My mother grew up in a family of 10, 8 of them women and only 2 men, so they are more powerful. I naturally carry within me the story of my mother and that of my female ancestors, their personal history as well as the grand history they have endured and made their own. And their lives tell the story of the Palestinian experience. The stories these women carry weave the history of a people denied their identity, stripped of their rights. It is a story made up of vanished places, transformed experiences, and scattered memories. Now, I'd like to share with you a trailer, a teaser of my 2 films. So, allow me to do this. Can we have the sound?
Sonaba, perdón, porque yo de aquí no escucho nada.
Oh, sorry. So you can hear it, right?
No se escucha, perdón. Perdón, lo voy a...
No, the sound is not audible.
No, está saliendo de la compu y debería salir de...
It should be in the loudspeakers, but it's only in the computer.
Ay, qué estrés.
لينا أول مرة أخذتك على الرحمة شايفة؟ هاي أنتي صغيرة مع ست أمي وهاي أنا وهاي أمي. Je ressemble à qui du coup? Là, c'est nous 4. Les 4 générations. Ma mère m'a transmis sa langue à moitié. Elle m'a transmis un bout de langue. Quand j'étais petite, elle m'emmenait passer tous les étés dans son village palestinien, Derhamna. Ce village, elle l'a quitté il y a plus de 30 ans pour réaliser son rêve de devenir comédienne. Tourne-toi un peu vers la caméra.
It took me over 30 years to reach this dream of becoming an actress.
À chaque fois que je la questionne sur son histoire, elle me répète « N'ouvre pas les douleurs du passé ».
So I was asking myself questions about not repeating the pains of the past. I'm sorry, but the sound is not reaching the booth appropriately for interpreting.
J'ai toujours pensé que c'était en Algérie, ces images.
C'est une salle de fête de la mairie, je crois. Et c'est ta grand-mère qui a tout organisé. Le pays de la réalité, tous les Algériens tiers. T'en souviens un petit peu, toi? Non. J'ai l'impression que c'est pas la réalité.
I have the feeling
Con esas dos películas,
with these two films, I learned everything. I learned to operate a camera, to record sound, to write, to edit, to discuss films, to tell stories of societies, stories of human beings and of peoples. These films have allowed me to find my voice and my place in the world amongst countries and within various communities. For my father, what helped him find his place in the world was being a mime. And you must know that all those images, archive images that are appear in my films, were filmed by my father. So I was very lucky because I had this visual inheritance that was very enriching. My father began performing mime on the streets at the age of 18. It's, his name stage was Le Mime Susu, the Mime Susu. I have always wondered how he came to devote himself to that when he was not destined for the world of art. Not at all. My father was born in France in 1957 and during the French colonization of Algeria. Like all Algerians at the time, my father was considered a subject of the French colonial empire, a subject with few rights. They called him an indigenous people, les indigènes. My grandparents, his parents, had emigrated from Algeria to France in the 50s to work as cheap labor in French factories, exploited, stripped of their rights and their Algerian identity. And they fought secretly for their country's independence at the same time. Their independence from France, the country that denied them their independence. So there was a very serious contradiction for those Algerians living in France. My father became a French citizen at the age of 28, despite having lived his whole life in France and having been born in France. He only visited Algeria twice when he was a child and a teenager. His parents never explained to him the circumstances that forced them to migrate to France. Throughout his childhood, they told him that they would only spend a short time in France and that they would all return together to their country, to Algeria, when would become a free country. But they never explained why. In the end, they never went back. And my father inherited that silence. So I ask myself, is that why he became a mime artist? Is that why silence became his way of being? Have also inherited that silence. I belong to a generation that grew up in the absolute silence surrounding the Algerian War of Independence and lasted 8 years, the last stage of 130 years of war, colonization. And I belong to a generation that was born of grandparents who were apparently without a history. These grandparents were terribly silent, unable to tell and pass on a paradoxical journey. Born indigenous in French colonial Algeria, they were foreigners in their own land, stripped of their identity, forcibly emigrated to France to work without rights. This Algerian immigration, which was labor migration, was experienced as supposedly temporary exile because they all wanted and wished to go back to their homeland. Having decided and often fought for Algerian independence, and having worn themselves out, working hard in France with that hope of one day returning to their country, a free country, they ended up making a life for themselves in France, which was the country that had denied them the right to independence. It was too difficult and costly to uproot themselves again when their children had already started school and when their children had knew nothing of their country of origin. Also, they had continued they have already started paying their social security contributions, and if they left for Algeria, they would lose all of that. So, this generation of migrants built their lives upon the illusion of a return that never took place. My father's generation and my own is the heir of these dead ends of memory and transmission. So I grew up in that silence, but I also grew up with images because when I was a child in the 1990s, my father always carried a video camera with which he filmed everything that happened when we went together. Everything that was going on would occur when we were traveling with my mother and my family to visit the Palestinian maternal family in Galilee. In those images that my dad filmed, that I used in my films, we travel through ancient lands, transformed territories, some now inaccessible or completely destroyed: Nazareth, Jericho, Jerusalem, Tiberias, or Gaza. So, in those images, we see a fragmented Palestine, closed borders, barbed wire, walls, restrictions. This reality of a territory scarred by war contrasts with the atmosphere that emanates from these images filmed by my father with happy memories. I see myself swimming in the Sea of Gaza with my father, or having a picnic near the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. These places of conflict that, in those images, are family holiday destinations. Amidst these images, suddenly we see a young man facing the camera. That's my father, age 30, moving in and out of the frame. I will share a small video with you later on. He sets up his camera and stages himself, dressed as a woman, as a clown, mimicking everyone around him. And he is very aware of the camera. He seems to be playing a role or several ones: the role of a young foreigner, the role of a stranger, of an intruder from elsewhere who seeks, through laughter, a way of being accepted. So I look at this young man in those images. I know he's my father, very aware of that. But then I suddenly see him as a fictional character, the mime Suzu. I look at my father as if I were looking at a stranger whom I want to get to know better, to understand him better. I ask myself, who is this man? What is his story? How does he dare to introduce the burlesque into a territory marked by war, destruction, loss, and tragedy? How does he allow himself to be light-hearted? Amidst the others, he seems to bear exile as a burden, exile in space and time, from very far from his homeland, a stranger in the land where he is. His silence overwhelms us. We feel his loneliness and his suffering, but he makes us laugh all at the same time. Through his images and the way he appears in those images, Mime Zuzu has created a kind of imaginary territory beyond physical borders to combat the drift of his inner exile. So this is where we can find this link with the earth. He, an Algerian immigrant in France, who neither grew up nor lived in Algeria, he is someone uprooted who seeks to cling to something that will put down roots for him. And as I watch him, I realize something. As a spectator, I am witnessing a body's struggle to exist in a context that seems to allow no laughter. By staging himself, he adopts a political stance. He combats exile with his body, resists tragedy with joy. It is his way of coping with reality. It is a political stance, and laughter becomes his strategy of resistance. And then this real life character becomes a fictional character, a political character, a political figure that allows for reflection on the nature of his resistance. His movements from one place to another, from one group of people to another, trace also an original cartography of Palestine. Because in those images by Susu, each place hides a story and has been the object of a transformation. Each image becomes the proof of a denied existence. So we see Palestine before the 90s, before the separation wall that was built in 2004. We see the whole of Palestinian culture, families, men, women, food, village traditions, religious traditions. We see a territory that today faces the threat of total destruction. We see the fragility of Palestinian memory, constantly under threat of disappearing. We move through cities, through villages, through the mountains, by the sea, through historic ancient sites. From one sequence to the next, we encounter men lined up and dancing the dabke, a traditional Palestinian dance, and women singing traditional wedding songs, dressed with colorful floral dresses. We also encounter elderly Jewish men with long white beards, wearing long black robes. We pass through checkpoints and see Israeli soldiers, armed and threatening. We move from intimate interiors to playful exteriors, parks, lakes, markets, and the ruins of all Palestinian villages destroyed in 1948 during the Nakba. 90% of villages were destroyed in 1948. Thus, with his unbalanced presence within this Palestinian family, searching for his place, filming himself, filming us, Zuzu restores each of us to a rightful place and preserves evidence of our existence unconsciously. And this is the end of my talk, but now I would like to show you a brief video of these archival images by Zuzu. These are just fragments that will show in images what I've been talking about.
جدي جوز هاي الجمعة سيد مازن بعد في الجوال يجي جوال But very
Thank you, Your Majesty, and thank you for welcoming us, welcoming my colleagues and myself at this time. I think it's an important time for us.
Alors, on va parler en français du coup tous les deux.
Oui.
Ouais. Tu veux dire quelque chose ou je dis
So we
quelque
will
chose?
speak
Alors moi j'ai une remarque.
French. Are we going to say something? I have a comment
Bien sûr de l'essence, enfin,
about the need,
du fait que c'est essentiel d'être dans un
this
monde
fact
fraternel
of
de solidarité.
that it is essential to be in a world of
Le ressentiment, je pense à tout à l'heure,
fraternity,
quand tu
solidarity.
parlais voilà,
And
de
I'm
ce
thinking about
collectif qui
Cynthia and what she said this
agit
morning
à
about
partir
this
d'un
group,
ressentiment.
this collective, this group that is acting on the
Moi,
basis
je
of
vois
resentment.
comme Palestine ou Algérie,
And I come from places like Palestine and Algeria.
Éthiopie,
So
je
for
vois
me,
dans la
it's
solidarité
difficult to believe in utopia and also in
cette guerre
solidarity and the abolition of
c'est ce qui
borders,
condamne le Sud et victime
because this
du
is what
Nord et de l'Orient.
condemns us,
Et en fait,
and the South is the victim and the
de manière
North
très
is
manichéenne, mais
dominating.
je sais
It's
que le
a very
ressentiment il
Manichaean
existe
way of
évidemment,
expressing this, but
mais
of course, resentment is
les gens
something that is negative, but
énormément euh, de
we
ressentiment contre
and
ce qui leur
our
est fait.
people have a lot of
Et
resentment
idéalement,
against
c'est
what
très
is
facile
done
pour
to
moi,
them.
mais c'est bien qu'ils fassent face à des systèmes aussi violents.
Ideally, it would
La
be
violence parfois est une manière de
the right
résister,
thing
et Fanon en a
would
parlé
be to
aussi.
resist
Et je me
peacefully,
demandais
but
comment on
in these
fait
circumstances, violence is also a way of resistance.
travail
And I am
hyper quand on sort
wondering about this
ces
when
particularités, de ces singularités.
the earth
Alors
brings
nous, on ne
us
peut
out
vivre
of
que dans
these
notre réalité,
singularities, taking into account also that we can only live in that singularity because our reality is completely different from that of others who have never experienced living under missiles
Je le dis
and
parce que
in
si une
this
journée
constant
ici,
atmosphere of
le corps
war.
et l'esprit changent à tout jamais,
And
on ne voit plus les
you
choses de
know, in
manière
just
différente.
1 second, things change completely,
Pas savoir
and then we
comment
can
avoir de
not see
l'empathie
things
et arrêter
in the same way ever again.
quand
And when you
les
experience
demandes
such
de fraternité
a
et de
thing,
solidarité deviennent
that
fortes,
changes you for
on n'arrive pas à
always.
les recevoir.
And
Je sais pas
fraternity
si je suis
words
claire.
are always in the north, in the south. We don't feel we can receive that. Do you understand what I mean? I'm an astronaut and a scientist a scientist, and I also live in inhabit this planet like everyone else here. So I'm very aware of all these problems, but I have this weakness of thinking that once human beings have enough to uh, feed themselves and to take care of themselves, our third need is culture, because this is what makes us understand that we share the same planet. And when we look at all this from a certain distance, we understand that all these problems are small or insignificant in a sense. Of course, it's very difficult to see that from closer. But well, when I go to schools and when we go to, well, when we think that we will not be destroyed, or that we look at people and think they're each defending their own uh, priorities. But nevertheless, when we look at the planet, we should think that we are sharing a destiny, and we should therefore be more,
J'ai une question
we
par rapport à
should
ça, je
be
rebondis,
sharing
mais
greater solidarity. I have a
comment
question about this.
quelqu'un qui est face
How
à la mort,
can someone who is facing
bombardé,
death,
on peut lui demander protège ta
who
terre,
is under bombs,
d'avoir
how
cette
can we
préoccupation
ask that
constante de
person to
communication, de
take
pouvoir
care of
rester
the
vivant?
earth
Et
when
c'est
that
là où
person is not sure
on parle
they
de la
will
question
be
mentale,
able
mais
to
quand on
survive?
bénéficier de la culture, de la mettre en
So,
place
of course, we can
avec les
benefit
idées
from culture.
exprimées,
It's wonderful, or
il
we
faut
can
d'abord être
consume it,
libre
let's
pour
say.
être libre, c'est
But
pouvoir
for
vivre
that, we
d'ailleurs.
need to be free, and for that, we need to be
c'est pas
surviving.
ceux qui sont sous les bombes, c'est surtout ceux qui bombardent. Voilà.
Mm.
C'est ceux-là qu'il faut éduquer encore plus que les
Well,
autres.
it's not only about people under suffering the
Est-ce
bombs,
qu'on a
are the
temps pour
ones
converser ou s'il faut passer
uh,
au public? Est-ce qu'on a dépassé
using them. I don't know whether we have
mais-
much more time, or in order
il y
to
avait...
give a little bit,
Oui,
give the chance to our audience
Je peux juste dire que
for some Q&A.
c'est
As for your
le fait
story,
que
I
je
would
suis né en
like to
Algérie
add
et en fait ma
that it's
famille
funny, I was born
algérienne
in Algerian. In fact, my
était
family
notre colonie française.
and
Donc on est venu en Algérie
come from another
après la indépendance.
former French colony,
Mon
and they
père était prof
moved to Algeria because
et
after
on est en Algérie
independence, my dad was a professor,
parallèle et puis
and I
après
was
avec Algérie.
born
Et
in
je pense
Algeria.
que il y a eu toute
It's funny, this
une
parallelism
population
with
afro-nigérienne
Camus,
qui sont venus en Algérie à cette époque-là.
and
Et je pense que c'est parce que
there is
passait
a
mieux
group of
que les
French
Français
Algerians who
parce que
moved
l'Algérie avait
here. We had been
besoin de
more
formation,
accepted
etc.
as
c'est ça.
Juste
French
l'Algérie,
or
je voulais dire,
white people
je suis né en
because
Algérie
Algeria
et j'ai
needed
eu une première année en
professors
Algérie
and trainers, and
Oui, parce qu'après l'indépendance, l'Algérie a été un peu la
I
Mecque
was there during
des
my
nationalités,
childhood.
des
And
révolutions
after
humaines aussi,
independence,
qui
the
ont pu
country
partir,
became the
des
mecca of the
mouvements
revolutionary
révolutionnaires de
nationalities
gauche et de
worldwide.
droite du monde entier qui ont été
There
amenés en
were
Algérie pour reconstruire le pays
revolutionary
pendant l'indépendance.
left-wing movements and professors who had been attracted to
Est-ce que vous
Algeria
avez des
to
questions?
rebuild
Là.
the city after the independence. Do you have any further questions or comments?
Moi, c'est juste une réaction. Je veux vous remercier tous les deux
Just a reaction, and thank you
pour
very
votre
much, the
sagesse
two of you. Thank you so much for your
aussi de par
wisdom
ton
and your
ciel et
words.
toutes ces étoiles que tu contemples à longueur de journée.
And thank you for all this
Merci beaucoup
myriad of
vraiment de
wonderful
ce que tu nous as montré.
stars
Je
and
suis vraiment très
explanation on the
touchée
universe. And Lina,
de
thank you
ce que
for your
tu
images.
vois vraiment
I
d'être
feel
vraiment dans cette action
very, it's very
dans ton
touching, this
territoire,
specific
dans tes archives
action
familiales.
on this
Je suis exercée ce
territory and
soir
your
et
family archive.
je,
I believe it's
je
really
trouve ça
important what
magnifique.
you
Je
did, your
sens que,
dad. I
tu
believe
arrives à
it's
retisser
absolutely
l'histoire et que, à
wonderful.
travers ta jeunesse, ton engagement
And I
philosophique,
feel that
dans ton
you have
projet,
interwoven
eh bien,
these
tu fais partie
narratives
du silence
with the
en,
youngsters
en
thanks
redonnant
to
un
your
sens,
family history.
et en remettant au
You
centre les
have
personnes.
allowed your dad's
Autant
voice
de voir
to come out of silence and putting people at the center. It's amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing your. I think it's part of the great news of this morning session. So Anna has expressed it also very wisely. So thank you very much for your humility and the great work that you've done and how you have expressed your ideas and how you've helped us reflect on solidarity, often done in a silent manner. So thank you very much to the two of you.